What was the worst experience you've had during Halloween? I was like 7 or 8 and dressed like an angel. Parents took me to the Science Museum, where they set up little houses for the kids to trick or treat in. I got so much candy and was so proud of myself. But when we left, all my candy was gone. The little boy behind me had been taking scoops of my candy and putting it in his basket. I cried. I was trick or treating with 3 buddies freshman year of high school. We were joking about being a little old to do it, but it was all in good fun. Some 2-year-old kids were running around in skull masks doing rowdy teenager stuff and decided it would be a good idea to take my candy. They were much larger than us and had no trouble. One grabbed my bag, and another one grabbed me and threw me down in the street. No serious injuries, but I had skinned knees and palms. I was pissed. Filed a police report, and the officers took it seriously. We got out the yearbook and identified 3 of them, and they were picked up that night. They were charged with strong arms robbery, as juveniles, and got a ton of community service and had to pay for my mom's lost pillowcase plus candy plus damaged clothing. I caught some flack for it at school from their girlfriends. They were ordered not to talk to me, but didn't really care because I felt like justice was served. I was going out with a girl back in high school whose birthday fell on Halloween. Her brothers absolutely hated my guts for no reason whatsoever. I wasn't a troublemaker, didn't do things I wasn't supposed to, and tried really hard to get on good terms with them. Anyway, she threw a birthday party for herself in her older brother's basement. I showed up with a couple friends, and while the party was pretty lame, I was there for her. When I went to give her the gift I had wrapped, her older brother grabbed me by the collar and shoved me outside on the concrete steps. I asked him what his problem was. He told me to get the hell out of his house. His sister tries to get him to stop and tells me it's okay to go back inside the house. Her other brothers then showed up shortly after, and well, I got my ass handed to me. I ended up just leaving the party with a black eye and a bruised up face. I lied to my parents that I picked a fight with someone and lost. We broke up shortly after. This happened to my friend who is not on Reddit. It's Halloween night, and there's a knock on her parents' door. Dad goes to open it, and there's a man with a bag on his head standing on their porch, silent. The man makes a move to step into their house, and Dad pushes him backward. Everyone watches as the man falls backward off of their step and smashes his head on the ground. It is revealed that the man with the bag is my friend's grandfather, Mom's dad, who was trying to Halloween prank them. He was rushed to the hospital with permanent damage, no longer able to care for himself or his wife, who also had health issues. They both ended up in convalescent care. Additionally, my friend's mother never forgave her husband, placing the blame for the accident entirely on his shoulders. They divorced shortly after. I was 14, and I went out with my group of friends, and I was always the one left out. They dressed in girly costumes, and I was a full-on clown with big shoes. I walked with one of the girls' moms the entire time because they were ahead, and the big shoes slowed me down. They went into a haunted house, and I was too scared, so I waited outside and then I couldn't sleep over because I was really allergic to my friend's cat. I did find a $20 bill on the floor, though. Junior year of high school, my cousin and I volunteered to drive some of the younger kids from church and chaperone their trick-or-treating. We were walking down the street, back toward my truck, when I heard a familiar sound but didn't click at first. I hear it again and feel something was past me and hit the concrete. I realized it was someone with a pellet gun. About the time one of the little girls screamed this blood-curdling wail and fell down. He had shot her in the eye with a CO2-powered pellet gun. My cousin took off running toward a yard, leaned down and grabbed a hunk of gravel/concrete from the driveway and chunked it into the tree. He had a 92 miles per hour fastball, and hit the kid, knocking him from a limb and onto the ground. I'm wrangling 7 kids, from 6-12 years old, all screaming and crying while my cousin is beating the boogers out of this guy's sinus cavity. Parents are running outside, and it's chaos when the police and ambulance finally show up. I had costume plans with a friend who chickened out on me and wanted instead to wear her own regular clothes while I was in a ridiculous Ginger Spice costume and pass her clothes '80s as 80s. Definitely wasn't influenced by her snotty roommate, who called me immature for what I wore or anything. I had her drop me off after that and decided to find other plans. Decided to try to hang out with some of my other friends, who were male, but a girl who didn't like me and let them use her for rides. Considering none of them were interested in her, refused to pick me up and let me hang out with them. I didn't have a car at the time. So, I decided I was going to walk there, about a 7-mile walk. Got a quarter of a mile down the street, tried to cross, and got hit by a car. 13 years later, I still have the metal in my ankle. When I was around 8 or 9, I went over to my friend's house to fool around a few hours before a Halloween party, which we would be going together. In the backyard, his sister came up to me and asked where their dog was. They had a black chow chow who was fairly docile, was around 4 years old, and bigger than me. I showed her to the dog, and he was chewing on a bone. Of course, back then, I made a huge mistake, but I pointed to the dog, and in a split second, he went from chewing on the bone to chew on my arm. I tried to run, but he had a vice grip on my arm, but eventually he let go. At the time, my friend's parents weren't home either, lol, so his sister called 911, and they ran inside and left me outside in the backyard with the dog circling and growling at me. The maid came running outside and threw a chair at the dog, which made him back off. Also, while I was out there, I felt strange. There was no pain, and there was a ton of adrenaline in my system, but I sort of felt at ease. I also started to reflect on what had just happened. There was a lot of white stuff, which looked like whipped cream, tissue, oozing from my wounds along with a ton of blood. Blood was everywhere. Stained the concrete and grass. Everyone was crying too. Paramedics arrived, and really everything up until the ER was a blur. I had 6 cuts, 3 cuts on the inside, and 3 on the outside of my forearm. 4 stitches for 2 cuts and 1 for 1, and vice versa. And 10 more stitches for the inside of my arm, muscles and whatnot, 20 or so stitches total. The doc said I was lucky to still have my arm as the dog's mouth was just the right size. It missed several vital veins and arteries. It was very traumatic, but thankfully, it did not ruin our relationship, and funnily enough, I was back at his house after a few weeks, petting the dog again, with a lot more caution. I think it's safe to say, we did not go to the party later that night. I grew up in northern Canada, and when I was probably 5 or 6, I got me a Darth Vader costume, one of those vinyl costume and capes with a lightsaber and thin plastic mask. I thought I was so cool back then. Well, being northern Canada, it was exceptionally cold that year, like below 30 C. I went out that evening bundled up and ready to show off my cool outfit, but it was so cold, the costume just cracked and disintegrated as I went around the block. Due to the weather, I barely got around the block, but by the time I was home, I just had the lightsaber and mask. The rest of the costume just fell apart in pieces as I moved. In my 20s, one of my friends would have a giant shindig every year. My ex and I went 3 years in a row. And each year, he became more and more of a sloppy mess. The first year wasn't too bad. The second one, he ended rolling around in the grass in the backyard making a fool of himself. But the third year, we showed up a couple of hours early to help our friend set up. But as soon as we got there, my ex decided to take one of those giant yard cups that people carried around in Vegas and made himself an enormous, Long Island iced tea. He drank that thing down in 15 minutes tops. He started to get sick right as people started to show up. He spent the whole night sitting on the back porch, vomiting like he was starring in the remake of The Exorcist. And for some reason, his friends thought I should have been sitting with him rubbing his back or something. He put himself in that position. He could live with the consequences. His friends always encouraged him to drink like that, so I left him with them and went home. We broke up after that. I don't care if people drink, but what I can't stand is a sloppy drunk that knows they're pushing their limits and keeps going anyway. I had to wear a dress for school all the time. This one was below my knees, and when I was running, my feet got caught in the dress. I fell and skinned my knee and my legs. Went trick or treating anyway because the blood made my costume look more real. It was freezing out, and I was shivering. Fell again and hurt my hands. But since it was so cold, it hurt even worse. While I was dealing with that, my friends wanted me to go to the neighborhood across the road. I said no and said that I was hurting too much. One of the kids I was with said that I was a goody-goody because my parents wouldn't let me go, and I was lying to them about being in pain. He stole my candy, and I went home bloody and empty-handed. When I was around 12, I went out trick-or-treating with a friend. Ran into some older kids my friend wanted to hang out with, so we tagged along. They wanted to go pumpkin smashing. I was a rule follower and didn't want to be around trouble, but I let my friend talk me into it. We came to a house that had a bunch of great pumpkins. You could tell they spent a bunch of time on them. There was a candy bowl with a note, so the kids started destroying the pumpkins. I just watched, feeling uncomfortable. A couple of days later, I was reading the paper and saw a letter to the editor from the house owners. They listed the address. It said how awful it was and how it wrecked their kids, who spent so much time on the pumpkins. I felt sick. I showed my friend, and he thought it was cool and took it to show those other kids. I realized then our association was more about living on the same street than friendship. I still feel terrible. Went to a small Halloween get-together, me, my wife, and a few friends, and had a great time playing games and drinking. My wife even got fairly drunk, which is really unusual for her. We go home around midnight, Uber, we're responsible, and get ready for bed. My wife starts having some abdominal pain, but we don't think anything of it. It's getting close to that time of the month, nothing really unexpected. Fast forward an hour later, and she's writhing on the bed in the worst pain of her life. I rush her to the ER, and the staff there take her into a room and start doing their thing, asking questions, drawing blood, etc. One of them took me out into the hallway and gave me the worst news I've ever had. There's a chance that it could be serious, maybe ovarian cysts or some kind of aggressive cancer, and her life could very likely be in danger. Holy shit. I go back into the room and try to keep a strong face on for her sake. She hasn't heard any of this, and they've barely started drawing blood to run tests. Then, suddenly, her pain evaporates. Gone. She looked up at a nurse and asked if she had been given any drugs, and was told no, all they've done so far is draw blood. Turns out it was a kidney stone. A stone. I had the ever-loving shit scared out of me over a little tiny stone, 4 millimeters, as it turned out. Granted, I'm sure it hurt like absolute hell, but even 10 years later, I'm furious that that person had that conversation with me before they even ran any tests. Jesus Christ, I thought I was going to lose her. Yeah, we've never gone back to that hospital. One Halloween, I went downtown to apply for a job at Barnes & Noble's. All of my friends were away at college, along with my girlfriend at the time, so after I applied for the job, I didn't have much to do. I also felt kind of down because things had gotten pretty rocky in our relationship when she left for school, so I decided to walk. I live in Chicago, so I ended up by Lakeshore Drive and just started walking down the trails, listening to music, and looking at the lake and the people. It started getting dark, and I had already walked a pretty good distance, but I didn't feel like stopping. I ended up walking from downtown all the way to Belmont Harbor, which is pretty far. That harbor was very close to where my girlfriend lived, so she and I would often go there around this time and watch the water. I sat there for about an hour, watching the waves and smoking cigarettes, before deciding I should get going back home. I could have walked over to the train I would take to her house, but I decided to walk back the way I came. So, I walked all the way back downtown and got on my train home. I had taken time off after graduating high school, so I was used to my friends not being there all the time, but that was the first night I actually felt alone. Choked on a gobstopper. Heimlich got it out of my trachea, but it then got stuck in my esophagus, and I got it down with some bread. My throat hurt for days. My parents called an ambulance, but we got it resolved before they came. Super scary. I have 2 young kids now that have been getting gobstoppers/jawbreakers on Halloween since they were 2. I always take them out and throw them away. I was 12, and a man yelled at me and told me I was too old to be out trick-or-treating. I felt so bad that I gave all my candy to my little brother and just walked with him for the next hour. When I got home, my mom asked me why I didn't have any candy, so I told her what had happened. She asked me who said that to me and I told her which house. I don't know if she ever did anything about it. But since I've become an adult and bought my own home, I don't care if you are 90 years old. You're getting candy. Halloween is for everyone. It's a tie, but for very different reasons. The first was in middle school, age 11 or 12, while trick-or-treating with friends. Some jerks threw eggs at us out a car window, hitting one friend and splattering raw egg on at least one other, and while we were recovering from that, some older/bigger kids stole another friend's bag, pillowcase, of candy. It was not very fun. The other worst Halloween was with my abusive ex. He was invited to a costume party by work friends and told everyone went all out for it. So, he decided that we would go as a fairy pimp and fairy hoe, basically a pimp and whore with wings. He decided that I had to dress super slutty, getting me clothing from a sex shop and some cheap pre-made pimp outfit for him. My costume cost over $100, and we did not have that type of money to spend. We go to the party, him looking like shit and me looking like a literal streetwalker, something I've never been comfortable with, and he knew that. I was overdressed, technically underdressed, as I was basically in panties and a bra, meeting these people for the first time in October in USA. It was cold, embarrassing, and a waste of money. I had a bad night, Felt completely objectified, in a bad way, but my ex loved having the sexiest girl at the party at his side, even though he largely ignored me, unless I started talking to someone other than him. That was interrupted right quick, as he had to be not just my main focus, but my only focus. I was 24-ish around this time, and it took over a decade, and ditching the less useful than an asshole of a BF, for me to enjoy costumes again. So, this isn't terrible, just funny and a little embarrassing. Went to Halloween Haunt at King's Dominion in 2016. My inquisitive girlfriend looked inside the window of this obviously painted facade that looked like a wagon. Inside was really a dressing room trailer for the costumed people paid to go around scaring guests. I'm already like, come on, let's get out of here. Then a clown appears, standing next to us like he was there the whole time. Hey, she's peeping. He squeaks, with a red nose and everything. Hey, everyone, she's a peeper. He shouts to guests passing by. He's pointing at her with his goofily large glove. I grabbed her, and we ran, and that was when we almost got cancelled by zombie clowns.